Ulschmid, and we got 1,000-some acres, 1,040 acres. This is my son Scott, and his kids are the 5th generation. That's where I grew up. My dad grew up, and my grandfather came from Germany and settled here. First they were down in New Ulm, and then land was cheaper up here, so they moved up here. And this is Becker County, Evergreen Township, in Section 130, Township 138, Section 138 I think it is. And this is Section 20. And we started planting trees in 1977 because I always did like trees. And pine trees, Dave Johnson was just starting in forester in Detroit Lakes, and he got us interested in trees, and we've been planting ever since. Oh, like Scott said, about 250,000 trees we planted over the years. And yeah, that's okay.
I'm Kent Wolf. I'm a forester with Minnesota DNR out of the Detroit Lakes office. I've been there working about 10 years. I do quite a bit of work with private landowners, whether it's helping them plant trees or looking at things like harvesting these trees.
And Dave Johnson, the forester from Detroit Lakes, came down one day this winter and said we should maybe look at thinning some of the trees he planted.
Okay. Statewide, there's a little bit of demand for pine bolts. We got a sawmill in Bemidji that's looking for pine, and one of the things that we did is we kind of looked through some of the records and looked at, you know, the trees that were planted in the 80s, that figuring it's about time to get in for a thin, just because the resource needs to be thin, and the mill's looking for wood, the loggers are looking for wood. It's a win-win for everybody, you know. And Tom's here was one of, he's got a bunch of plantations all over his property that are getting to this age, and it's looking like it's time to be in there thinning them. And so Dave was the forester that contacted him in this case to see if he'd be interested in doing that, and we kind of put together a package then to have his pine thinned. Typically you want to get into a pine stand as soon as you can. As soon as there starts to be competition between the trees, and that can happen anywhere roughly between age 20 and as late as age 30. It kind of depends on the spacing and on the ground and how well those trees grew. And one of the things we do is we kind of come out, we'll take a look at them, and as you move it toward the interior of this stand, you'll notice that the tree sizes are a little bit smaller. The crowns on the tops of the trees are quite a bit smaller. And if you were to actually look at a cross-section of the tree, most of these trees have probably started to decline in their growth. They're not growing as fast because there's too much competition for the light and water and nutrient resource. And so that's where we start to look at getting in to thin those trees and create a better environment for the residual trees to grow.
And Scott, he helped plant just about every tree that we got.
Yep. Everyone, except for 77. Yep. We're going 8. But yep.
What we were looking at, like with this planting, we're doing what we term a logger select. It's where we'd have a logger come in, and he'd take out one row for an access row, and then typically he'll leave about 4 or 5 rows, and then select the trees from within those rows. And we set up the criteria in which the trees are removed, telling them to remove the crooked trees, the twin top trees, any trees that are damaged, or any trees with poor form or shape, and the doubles. And then from there, what he'll remove next is start looking at tree size, and typically we'd have him remove the smaller trees and until he achieves the desired spacing that we're looking for in the stand. And that's a little bit different than we've done in the past. Part of it is because of today's equipment. They have machines, the processors with the arm where they can reach out and grab from within the rows. Where years ago, all that they had was machines that could go right down a row, and so we would just look at taking out a row, taking out one row, leaving two, taking out one row, leaving two, and the newer way, or the way where you're having the loggers choose which trees are removed, is it's more efficient for them and more efficient for the foresters' time, rather than marking trees or marking rows, and it seems to work out well for everybody. In the end, the landowner ends up with probably a little nicer looking product.
And some of the plantations we had bur oak, green ash, and some popple.
Okay.
Yeah, mixed in with the pine. But the deer eat those off all the time, though. They got a poor chance of growing.
A lot of landowners, they start to look at their pine and they're like, they think that there's no value there, or they wonder if it's worth doing it. But most of the time, once it starts to reach that somewhere between 20 and 30 years old, that there is value there, and not only is there value, but there's just such an advantage to them by having those pines removed. And then the question always is well, how do they go about doing it? And they can, there's forestry offices all over the state. They can just call and talk to a local forester just to get some baseline information. Maybe a logger knocks on their door and they're wondering about it. They still can, talk to a forester or talk to somebody that's done it before, and get some information about it before they jump into it. But once a landowner has, spoke with a forester, then they can choose if they want to go directly with a logger, if they want to contract with a private consultant to help them set up and sale their timber, or to use a state forester to help them do that. There's different ways for a landowner to do that, but it's always good to get some advice before they start the harvesting, because if they, in a stand like this, it'd be horrible to have somebody come in and clear cut a stand like this, because this stand is just starting to come into age, and once it's harvested once in here, you're going to start to see these trees respond and start to grow faster, and then you'll start looking at actually every about 10 years having a logger come in and selectively removing trees, and every time they come in, the trees that you're left with are essentially the nicest, biggest, straightest trees, and you end up with a pretty majestic stand of timber over time. And that's the other thing, when you open it up a little bit, you'll start to get a little bit of some other plant growth under here. You might get a few more shrubs and a few more things that make it a little bit more appealing for some of the wildlife.
At what point would you start replanting?
Basically, you got to get to that end harvest.
To the end, almost
and
the end.
when you'd be looking at probably about 120 years old, and you're looking at some
Right.
great big pine in here, and they reach the end of their life cycle, and once you do that final harvest, then you can plant, because you can't really plant red pine seedlings under red pine, because they spore down a disease that'll kill kill the little ones.
Yep.
So if you can get some white pine to start in, and sometimes that, if you have a mixed stand, they'll seed in, and that works out really nice, and you get some advanced white pine regeneration before that final harvest.
Yeah, that'd be after my time.
Yeah. After my time.
Yeah.